with regards to the nature of the Quran. So this discussion is a interesting discussion. It may be a discussion with regards to certain things that a person may wonder why are we discussing this, and there's a reason why we're discussing these things, and that has to do with a heterodox group that comes up in the history of Islam, known as the Mu'tazila. The Mu'tazila are essentially a group of rational philosophers. And rational philosophy sounds like a good idea when you think about it. I mean, it sounds like a good sell. There are many people who may think like, well, that's what the ummah needs more of right now. But rational philosophy here means what? So we talked about yesterday, is there any possibility that whatever that construction or thing is going on outside, if we can't change it, that's fine, but like if we can perhaps maybe delay it or do something about it, it would be wonderful. We talked about yesterday there are three different sources of knowledge. We talked about two of them. One was the empirical knowledge, the knowledge that's based on observation. The second is the rational knowledge, which is based on the rules of logic. And the third that we didn't talk about is the knowledge of revelation. It's known in the mustalah as ilm al-Wada'. Wada' yada'u in Arabic language means to put or place. The idea being that it doesn't belong in this realm. It comes from outside of this realm. It's a knowledge that comes from outside of this realm. It's put and placed over here. And that's what we talk about as the knowledge of wahi. So the theory of the Ahlus Sunnah Wal Jamah with regards to the theory of the Ahlus Sunnah Wal Jamah with regards to the knowledge of wahi is what? Is عَلَّمَ الْإِنسَانَ مَا لَمْ يَعْلَمْ. Allah Ta'ala taught the insan the thing that he didn't know and that he doesn't know and that he wouldn't have known ever if Allah Ta'ala didn't tell him. Whereas the Mu'tazila, they had a different view of the nature of wahi. They had a different view of the nature of revelation, which is what? They said that the perfect intellect, which is rooted completely in rationality, would be able to theoretically understand all of those things that wahi teaches us. So in a sense, the Prophets ﷺ were to them like the perfect philosophers. And everything that's explained by wahi has to be understandable. How? Has to be understandable by the intellect. Now this is a heresy, this is a deviance. This is not what the Sahaba radiallahu anhum taught. And the Mu'tazila themselves, they in some sense acknowledge that. However, they said that this is still a superior understanding. And so what they do is they'll go back through the Deen and look at certain things that don't look rational to them. And they will try to reinterpret them according to their own rational philosophy, which they felt was more correct. And they said that that reinterpretation, that's the correct meaning of wahi, that's the correct meaning of revelation. And so when we say rationalist philosophers, we don't say that they believe in rationality and we don't. Everyone believes in rationality. Rather, we believe that the wahi, the revelation, teaches you those things that you're not able to know through rationality. And so what's the Methyl, what's the example of that? If somebody tells you, I want you to tell me what the mass of Mount Everest is, and they hand you a gram scale that a jeweler has, or that like someone, drug dealer has, obviously you guys don't know what that is, but anyway. But, they hand you that gram scale and say, tell me what, weigh this and tell, you're not going to be able to tell what the weight of the mass of Mount Everest is going to be. Is it because there's something wrong with the gram scale? No, it's just the wrong tool for the wrong job. So that's what the Ahlus Sunnah say, that there are certain things that are taught through wahi that you're not going to understand through the revelation. Just because your life isn't long enough, you're not able to spend that. مَا تَسْقَطُ مِنْ وَرَقَةٍ إِلَّا يَعْلَمُهَا. What are you going to go and count all the leaves in the world? You don't have that long of a life. You don't have that many breaths. You don't have that much ability to see things. One leaf will fall one place. You cannot go fast enough to. So Allah Ta'ala, there are certain realities you're not going to be appraised of without a higher source of knowledge informing you. That's the function of wahi. That's why the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there are many people, I remember there's many people Allah Ta'ala give us all hidayah. There was one uncle in the masjid. And the masjid is a refuge for people with mental illness. This is actually one of the beautiful parts of the masjid. There are certain people in the masjid, the person wonders, why is this person even in the masjid? Because there's no place in the dunya where worldly people will tolerate this type of nonsense. But the house of Allah Ta'ala, it's a refuge for everybody. So the problem is when you make those people the masjid president, that's the issue, right? So what happened was one of the uncles, he came to me, he started banging on about how, the Muslims are so stupid and we don't even read the Quran, and why is it that there's a surah named Surah Hadid and the Europeans are the ones who had the Industrial Revolution before us? And I'm like, dude, you don't even know a lick of Arabic. You don't even know what's in Surah Hadid. You're just like, where does your mind connect the dots from where to where from? But then you get like, if Allah Ta'ala wanted if the Industrial Revolution was the goal of the Deen, Allah Ta'ala would have, instead of sending all these surahs with the words that they had in them, He would have sent you a physics book. He would have sent you a book on material sciences. He would have sent you schematics and blueprints. That's not the point of Islam. Yawm al-Qiyamah, nobody's going to weep and say, I wish I had a factory that makes hair dryers. What are people going to want? They say, I wish I, ya laytani, I apologize, I'm not a hafiz and I'm very groggy. I just had like a 10-minute nap, I just got up. The point is, Yawm al-Qiyamah, what is a person going to be upset about? They're going to rove around looking for good deeds, and they're going to wish that they hadn't said the word La ilaha illallah that would have saved them on that day. That's what the Deen is about. What's the primary objective of Deen? It's salvation. All other objectives tie in with that objective. It's what? Najat, on the Day of Judgment, when entire nations are burned on the garbage heap of the hellfire. If a person makes it that day, that person, that's the foes mubin for them. That's the clear and open and verified and verifying win for them. So the purpose of wahy is what? Is to convey those ideas that rationality, not through any defective rationality itself, but rationality just because of constraints, because of time constraints and dimensional constraints, a person would never be able to figure out. Whereas the Mu'tazila say, no, the rationality is an equal route toward getting to the truth as wahy is. We accept the wahy as being true, and because we can verify it rationally, that's why it's true. So there are certain things that's not going to work with. There are certain things that the Mu'tazila, they say, oh, the Ahlus Sunnah, they believe this thing. They say they believe in it in the wrong way. Why? Because their belief is irrational. And the Ahlus Sunnah, how do they justify their beliefs? They say, this is how Allah and His Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said it. This is why I believe it is true. And so the Mu'tazila were never really, they were never a really popular group amongst the awam, amongst the general public. But they were like, like how nowadays, like there's regular people and then there's like, whatever college professors in humanities on the campus that have like a $7 latte and they're telling you about the 15 different gender pronouns. They're kind of out of touch with the public, Those are the type of people that the Mu'tazila generally were. They're a very highly metropolitan set of people, artists, cultural people, artists, people at the forefront of culture, people at the forefront of the humanities and academic matters. Not the fuqaha and not the mutakallimun, not the muhaddithun, but people who like literature and historians and things like that, those type of people. And so what ends up happening is that in the Khilafah of Banu Abbas, Harun Rashid was a great patron of knowledge. And the Muslims were patrons of knowledge, whether that knowledge came from Muslims or came from other people as well. So there was a time in which, what did the Muslims do with all of their wealth and with the gold and silver and the money that they gathered through their conquests? They would do things like they would say that anyone who knows the knowledge of any of the ancient civilizations of the world, come to Baghdad and translate the old books. And whoever makes a translation will weigh the translation and pay you for it in gold. And so this is one of the big services of the Muslims to humanity, is that all of the wisdom and knowledge, philosophy, science, mathematics, all these things from the old civilizations, from China, India, the Greeks, the Romans, from different civilization, they gathered them all together. The Persians, they gathered all of them together, and they concentrated them in a place where everyone could study them. And so the Mu'tazila are basically a group of people who are heavily influenced by the rational philosophy of the Greeks, particularly the tradition of Socrates, Plato, Aristotle being the one who formally systematized the study of logic. And they're important people in the intellectual history of the world. Socrates seems like a very interesting person. He was a man who used to walk around Athens telling the truth to everybody. And so finally he just kept speaking the truth so much that everyone in Athens decided we have to kill this guy. And so they said, look, you speak the truth too much and you have to die. So just make it easy for everyone. Here's some poison, drink it yourself. Otherwise we're going to humiliate you when we kill you. So he did it. He drank the poison hemlock and he died. His student Plato, he continued his teaching, and then his student Aristotle was actually the personal tutor of Alexander the Great, amongst a number of other things. It's not that Aristotle invented logic. Logic is something that human beings innately do. It's part of the fitrah. But Aristotle was the one who wrote it down in such a way that it was easy to teach, easy to learn. So his having written it down is what essentially logic is associated with Aristotle to this day because of that. So Muslim scholars learned Aristotelian logic. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, again, it's something like learning math, right? Math isn't Greek and it's not Muslim and it's just math, right? So the same thing with logic, but there's a type of philosophical outlook that went with it. So for example, science, right? Science is good. Muslims don't have a problem with science. Maybe some illiterate person was trying to make a big bayan and make a name for themselves, but they're themselves not a learned person. They may say, oh look, religion versus science. There's no religion versus science. Science is like observation of the world around you, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what's the problem? The problem is when you think that all that exists is what you can observe around you. And this is a particular sickness of this civilization, right? This civilization is referred to in the Quran as Rum. And the Surah Rum, how does it describe them? Allah Ta'ala describes them as يَعْلَمُونَ ظَاهِرًا مِنَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ عَنِ الْآخِرَةِ هُمْ غَافِلُونَ. That they know a whole lot of information about the surface level, the zahir, the surface level knowledge of the life of this world. And when it comes to the deeper meanings, when it comes to the akhirah, they're completely heedless of them. So imagine a person who analyzed every atom inside of the head of a pin, and did a PhD thesis on it, and they, you're like, okay, how does this relate to like, I don't know, a goldfish? And they're like, gold what? Like they don't know anything else about anything else in the world. They know a whole lot about it, very little. It's simultaneously a very impressive and at the same time a very pathetic feat. So this is a type of mindset. The person who is drowned in the empirical, they'll never know Allah Ta'ala, because Allah Ta'ala is la tudrikul absar wa huwa yudrikul absar. Similarly, the rational world, there's nothing wrong with rationality. Anyone who says that Christianity and Judaism have a beef with rationality. Islam has no beef with rationality. I don't say this in order to make anybody happy, because anyone who knows me very well knows that I don't particularly, making people happy is not very high on my priority list. It's just a plain fact that Islam doesn't have a problem with rationality. If you actually read the Quran, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تَعْقِلُونَ, this is the exhortation to rationality is actually repeatedly there in the Quran. However, in its place, in balance and in harmony with empirical observation, in balance and in harmony with revelation. So the Mu'tazila, according to the Ahlus Sunnah, their idea of the Deen was what? It outsized the role of rationality, and it was like trying to weigh the mountain with the gram scale, which gives comical results at certain times. So back to the Banu Abbas, what happens is that the faction of translators and teachers and professors of Greek philosophy, their version of Islam that they champion, and it basically pushes this rationalist philosophy so much that it becomes in vogue amongst a certain class of people. And in fact, the Mu'tazili tutors of Mamun al-Rashid, they end up convincing him of their creed. And he will then end up appointing all the Mu'tazila. He'll dismiss all the Ahlus Sunnah, their judges, basically the ulama that work for the government. He'll end up dismissing them all. And what ends up happening is that they will be in power. And the Mu'tazila, despite the name rationalist philosophers, they're crazy. What will they do? As soon as they get into power, they will launch a scheme in order to basically kill the competition. So what they'll do is they have a contrived issue. This is something that happens again and again in the history of Islam, by the way, by heterodox people. The Ahlus Sunnah don't do this. They'll find a contrived issue, some really like really unimportant issue, a weird issue, and they'll make that issue into like an iman and kufr issue. Whereas ulama of the Sunnah, traditionally, takfir is like a last resort. It's not something that they harp on like first, right? Not the Mu'tazila. What the Mu'tazila, their judges do, they essentially, in their courtiers of the Khalifa do, they say, look, now anyone who's not a Mu'tazili, we're gonna either force them to recant and become Mu'tazili, or we're gonna kill them or jail them, beat them, we're gonna coerce them. And so they bring up this issue, which is what? Is the Quran the eternal and uncreated word of Allah, or is the Quran created? Now, who here has thought of this question before someone else brought it forth in front of them? I recall the first time someone asked this question, I'm like, what? Has absolutely no effect on your deen, has absolutely no effect as a normal person, as a non-scholarly person, has no effect on your deen, has no it really doesn't functionally change a whole lot with regards to the way you carry out your day-to-day affairs as a Muslim. And it's not something that, like, there's an answer, there's a correct answer to it, but it's not exactly clear. There's no like one surah that's like, like the Quran is not created, afala taqilun. It doesn't work that way, right? Rather, it's something that you'll know through a deeper study of the kitab and the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the Mu'tazila, they're like, nope, we believe the Quran is created, and whoever says that the Quran is eternal and uncreated attribute of Allah Ta'ala, that person is a mushrik, and that person has to die. And so what do? They will start calling the ulama forth to the court, and they'll ask them this question, and if they answer wrong, they'll chain them, they'll beat them, they'll jail them, some of them they killed them, they'll jail them, imprison them for long amounts of time. This is why Imam Shafi'i went to Egypt. He didn't go to Egypt because he heard the shawarma is better there. Anyone here been to Egypt? It's not better. Anyway, but the thing is, he didn't go there for that reason. Why did he go? It's because him and Imam Ahmad, the two of them, are like the champions of the Athari methodology and approach to Deen. And they're like, if we're in the same place and they kill us both, our school is going to die now. So they decided between them that Imam Ahmad will stay in Iraq and Imam Shafi'i will move to Egypt in order to lay low, because Egypt wasn't one of the central lands of the Muslims. It wasn't where the caliphate was. So it's like, you have to really leave Toronto and go lay low in like somewhere like in rural Manitoba or something like that, right? So that's what they did. And someone might say, oh, look, Imam Shafi'i had to leave his home, right? Lucky Imam Ahmad, he got to stay. No, actually that was the more difficult path. Why? Because Imam Ahmad, who was celebrated, not everybody from the Ummah follows the Hanbali madhab in fiqh. In fact, very few people do. However, Imam Ahmad was celebrated and beloved by the entire Ummah because of his prime position in hadith. He was, between the muhaddithin, they call him Amir al-Mumineen fil hadith. He was like the top carnivore. He was the Tyrannosaurus Rex of like hadith in his time. Everybody loved him. Why? Because everyone loves the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Everyone loves his hadith. Problem for the Mu'tazila, he's a Sunni. Okay? So everyone loves him, and if he says something, it will like everyone will listen. And the Mu'tazili people like, this is just some kind of like weird kind of fruity academic type. Nobody really is inspired by those people. And so what happens is they make a target out of him. They're going to make an example out of him. Either he is going to accept their Mu'tazili way, or they're going to make life living hell for him, and that's what they did. So Mamun al-Rashid calls him to the Caliphal court, and he asks him, what's your position on this issue? And he says, the Quran is an eternal and uncreated attribute of Allah Ta'ala, and The Mu'tazila say, no, it's created. And you know what he says? This is his adab too. The Khalifa will say to him, I'm the Amir al-Mu'mineen, you have to listen to me. So I command you that you change your position. He says, give me a dalil from the Kitab and Sunnah and I'll accept your opinion. He didn't say no, hell no, or like never, or like I'll see you in hell, or no. What did he say? He said, give me a dalil. Maybe I'm wrong. Give me a dalil so that I can accept it. These were very humble people. Their humility was like unbelievable. So they would beat him, and like he would be in pain, and they would alternate. So sometimes they bring their Mu'tazili, like half-baked Maulvi to debate with him, and he'll like shower the guy with dalil until he gets ghusl with dalil, mashallah, and he's not able to beat him in the debate. Then they'll try coercion, like I'm the Amir, you have to listen, and he says just give me a dalil from the Kitab and Sunnah so I can accept it. Then they'll beat him, they'll torture him, and they'll say accept it. He says give me a dalil and I'll accept it. He doesn't break, And so what happens is that this process is not just something that happens like once or twice. He is jailed and he's tortured. Like it becomes a spectacle over the reign of 3 khulafa. Ma'mun al-Rashid, al-Wathiq and al-Mu'tasim. The 3 of them, they repeatedly every couple of months they'll put him in solitary, beat him, torture him for a couple of months. They'll bring him out and try to do this thing again. And every time it's a fail. Finally, when the Khalifa al-Mutawakkil takes over, he's a politically astute person. Okay, he knows that the Ummah loves this guy. If he dies under my watch, there's going to be a problem. The Ummah used to love the ulama, and whenever it's not that, people think like, oh look, we have a caliphate, khilafah. There's these kind of nut job people that they'll tell you that, the ulama are wasting your time teaching you about aqidah and about salat and all of this other stuff. The khilafah is the important thing, and they're all just sellouts. Look, dude, read history. Some really, really, really messed up things happened under the khilafah. So the ulama, it's not like the ulama were like scot-free, and that as long as there's khilafah, everybody was like, buddy with the Deen. The rulers oftentimes were corrupt people, and the Muslims acknowledged them and whatnot, but it's not like the rulers were good people. So imagine that Imam Malik got beaten. Imam Abu Hanifa himself, when he died, he was in solitary. Right? Abu Jafar al-Mansur, the great-grandfather of Ma'mun, he actually, he refused to be a judge in his court, so he put him in solitary. He was jailed in a dried-out well. He used to teach dars from the bottom of a dried-out well. And many of the ulama say that even from solitary, because he wouldn't die, so they poisoned him. So that's messed up, man. Killing Imam Abu Hanifa, there's a good chance you're going to go to hell for that. You know what I mean? That's not like that's not like someone who like, oh good, cannabis is legal now and we're going to smoke weed after like Aqidah class. That's bad enough, but that's nothing compared to killing Imam Abu Hanifa. You're going to go to hell. That's not, unless he forgives you, that's pretty bad. You know what I mean? Beating Imam Malik, beating Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, this is pretty bad stuff. So Al-Mutawakkil, he knows, he's like, look, these crazy Mu'tazili, half-baked Maulvis, they're going to, because of their sectarian little disputes, right? This stuff happens, by the way, to this day. People say, oh, Fulan is Gustakh, Fulan is Kafir, over stuff that's not really that big of a deal, right? Over these little nitpicky things, they're going to end up killing Imam Ahmad. If Imam Ahmad dies under his watch, it's going to cause civil unrest. Politically, it's untenable. So what does he do? He very sagaciously, he fires all the Mu'tazila who are in his court. And he just hires the Sunni ulama again. The Sunni ulama, in their history, right? The policy of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum was what? Intellectual challenges met with intellectual response, military challenges met with military response. So the Khawarij, when they fought Sayyidina Ali, he fought them. And when they gathered an army together, he fought them. But when there was no army to fight, what did he do? He sent his cousin Abdullah bin Abbas radiallahu anhu to debate with them. And he gave the specific instruction to Abdullah bin Abbas that when you debate with them, don't tell them the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, give them jawab through the Quran only. Why? Because they don't believe in the hadith. Do you understand what I'm saying? They don't accept the hadith, so shut them up at their own game. You have to be intellectually one level higher than them in order to do that, right? You cannot be weak when you bring this fight to them. But the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and Ahlus Sunnah in general, what is the policy? The policy is that intellectual challenges met with intellectual response, and military challenges met with military response. And so what the Mu'tazila did, they're trying to use the lash and the whip in order to beat their Aqidah into people, and it didn't work. The Mu'tazila, basically, their way fails. In the intellectual arena, between Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari and Abu Mansur al-Maturidi, they basically start writing the works of refutation against the Mu'tazila, which catch on because they make more sense. And then finally Ghazali completely, like, he puts the nail in their coffin. I mean, after Ghazali, being Mu'tazili in the Ummah is like a joke. Like, nobody takes you seriously anymore because their arguments just don't make sense. So this issue with regards to the nature of the Quran is discussed in this book. One might say, well, why are we learning this irrelevant thing? It's discussed partially because as a refutation of the Mu'tazili position, but also partially as a thought exercise in order to know how to interpret statements in the Quran that can be taken ambiguously. And so you'll see the way that this issue is dealt with is the way that several issues afterward will be dealt with as well. So it's useful. It's useful as an exercise. So this the text says, وَأَنَّ الْقُرْآنَ كَلَامُ اللَّهِ مِنْهُ بَدَا بِلَا كَيْفِيَّةٍ قَوْلًا أَنزَلَهُ عَلَى نَبِيِّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ وَحْيًا وصدقه المؤمنون على ذلك حقا وأيقنوا أنه كلام الله تعالى بالحقيقة ليس بمخلوق ككلام البرية. So you can see this is the Sunni position, the standard Sunni position, that the Quran is the speech of Allah Ta'ala that emanated from Him without modality. And He sent it down on His Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as revelation, and the believers accepted it as true. Let's see where this, This is the translation I wrote. It's still a rough draft, so if you see mistakes, if someone wants to mark up a copy and send it to me afterward, I won't yell at you. In fact, I'll thank you. I might not take all of your suggestions, but I will thank you. The believers accepted it with certainty and truth. It isn't created like the speech of the created, meaning the speech of created things. So that's the standard Sunni position. Now, why? You should ask why. It's a valid question. Why? So first we'll explain what, and then we'll explain why it makes sense. So remember we talked about Allah Ta'ala not changing in time. Remember we talked about Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala being with all of His attributes as He was always, and as He is right now, and as He shall always be. So the Mu'tazila came up with this issue. They're like, look, obviously the Quran, you read it in time using, like sounds that you make from your throat, and using, writing it down on paper. That's obviously all created. How can you say that this is an attribute of Allah? And the answer to the question is that the Quran is a sifa of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, and it comes in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the first thing that Allah Ta'ala created from the creation, which is like meaning from amongst the first things, right? Is what? He created the pen and the tablet. He created the al-lawh wal-qalam, the tablet and the pen, and He commanded the pen to write everything that was and everything that is and everything that shall ever be. So this, people ask, they say, where did you get this from? I never heard of that before. بل هو قرآن مجيد في لوح محفوظ. It's mentioned in the Quran. And so this huge attestation of like this massive amount of knowledge that exists in the heavens in a place called al-lawh al-mahfuz, the preserved tablet. In it, Allah Ta'ala assigned certain words in the Arabic language that are created, that those words are such that whenever somebody reads those words, the attribute of the divine speech will come on that person. Now, what does it mean? So when we say something about Allah Ta'ala, it's different when that word is used for Allah, and it's different than when it's used for the creation. So when we say speech for us, we're talking about like talking or maybe writing. When we say speech with Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, it doesn't resemble the speech of human beings. Rather, the speech of Allah is an attribute, like Allah's mercy is an attribute, but it's not like your mercy and my mercy. Allah's anger is an attribute, but it's not like yours and mine. We talked about the anger of Allah. The anger of Allah is how Allah deals with those people whose tashri' and their takween are at loggerheads with one another. They're not harmonized with one another. With you and me, anger is what? Like a fly like landed in my, $5 espresso, and so I'm like, dang it. I would have said something else, but we're in the masjid, right? Darn it! Shucky darn. I'm angry, right? That's not how Allah Ta'ala's anger is. Allah Ta'ala's anger is not a reaction to anything at all. Why? Because Allah Ta'ala doesn't change. Rather, we use that word, but it means something else. So Allah Ta'ala has an attribute. It's called the kalam. It's called His divine speech. That kalam has a number of effects. One of which is that the person upon whom the effect passes, that person now understands something about what Allah wishes from them. However, there are other effects as well. So there are hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He was traveling with a detachment of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and so they passed by a tribe, and it's not like you can just roll up to Taco Bell or Timmy and buy a coffee and then bounce, right? So in the old days, the custom was what? When people pass by, they give you hospitality. Why? Because they're going to have to pass by your lands one day as well, and so it's good to be on good terms with people. So they refused hospitality to them. And so what happened? So they went on, there's nothing to eat, nothing to drink, let's just keep traveling. Finally, someone from that tribe runs and catches up with them. They say, is there anyone amongst you who knows ruqya, that knows incantations to heal the sick? Sa'd bin Abi Waqqas says, I know it. He says, our chief needs ruqya. He says, no, you guys, we came to you and you didn't help us. And now you want me to heal your chief? I said, it's going to cost you. So they negotiated a price, a certain number of sheep it's going to cost. And so he went and he read the Fatiha over that chief, and he got better. And then when he arrived in Medina Munawwara, radiallahu anhu, he told the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam about the incident that happened, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was amazed. He said, how did you know that this is a property of the Fatiha? And he says, bring me from the meat of those sheep so I can eat it as well. Meaning what? Indicating that what he did was not only correct, but it was also permissible. So there are a number of sifat, a number of effects of the sifa of Allah's kalam. And shifa and rahma, all of these things are mentioned in the Quran as well as being effects of this kalam as well. And so that's that attribute of Allah Ta'ala, that's what the divine speech is. So if you look in there was one young man, he came and he kind of got upset about some of the things that I said in the Jummah khutbah. And I kind of wish he would come and actually sit in the dars for a little bit so that he could understand what I was trying to say. I don't know again, almost no one here was here in the khutbah, so it's not useful to talk about it too much. But we talked about the wahi as it's the passing of that divine attribute, the effect of that divine attribute over the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what the wahi was. The words of the wahi were taught by Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam. But the wahi itself came on the heart of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam from Allah. And so what we say is the Lawh al-Mahfuz has the words in it, but the words are not what we say are uncreated, because language is all created. Words are created, paper, ink is created, voices, sounds are created. But when you read those words, when you recite those words, when you write that sounds, when your eyes see it on paper, when you write it with your hand, then what happens, it evokes the effect comes on that time and on that place, on that frame within creation, that effect hits it. Just like a person asks Allah for His rahmah, the rahmah will pass over them. A person sins and commits kufr and a'udhu billah, disrespects and mocks Allah Ta'ala, then the ghadab of Allah will pass over that person. Right? That's an effect of one of the divine attributes. So this is the connection between what you see that may seem to be created, and what's the connection between that and the uncreated sifa of Allah, that Allah Ta'ala linked in His creation, that whenever someone reads these words or recites these words or writes these words, then this effect will come over that person. And so what happens is that with Allah Ta'ala, the Quran is one of His attributes. In the creation, these words were selected by Allah Ta'ala to be the link between the human being and pulling the effect of that attribute onto them. And so this is what Allah Ta'ala means when He says this in the Quran. Someone says this is a real pie in the sky, philosophical type of a real hippie type of discussion. Where did you get all this from? It's a good question. It's a question that should be asked, and it's a question that if it can't be answered, then that's a problem. Okay? Allah Ta'ala says, yesterday was Jummah, right? Anyone here read Surah Al-Kahf? Don't raise your hand because you don't want to destroy your reward and stuff, but I'm sure all of you did. Especially, Wada probably read it like 3 times, man. MashaAllah. So the idea is what? Surah Al-Kahf, right? The last ayat of the Surah Al-Kahf, قُلْ لَوْ كَانَ الْبَحْرُ مِدَادًا لِكَلِمَاتِ رَبِّي لَنَفِدَ الْبَحْرُ قَبْلَ أَن تَنْفَدَ كَلِمَاتُ رَبِّي وَلَوْ جِئْنَا بِمِثْلِهِ مَدَدًا. Say, Ya Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, if the ocean, right? How many oceans are there in reality? There's like one ocean, it's just one ocean. You know what it's called? I'll give $5 US, it's like $6. I'll give $5 to anyone who can tell me what that one ocean is called. It's called Panthalasia. You can look it up. At any rate, you know how Pangaea is like the one like supercontinent? Panthalasia is the one ocean. And unlike Pangaea, Panthalasia is not broken up. It's all one body of water, right? There's no... You understand what I'm saying? Khair. So the ocean, this what's, you know, this is... Allah Ta'ala says what? He says, say if the ocean was ink with which to write the words of my Lord, the ocean would have been exhausted before the words of my Lord are exhausted, and even if we brought another ocean afterward. Okay, what does this mean? Does this mean if we could only get a third ocean, then we'd get the job done? No, it's a very stylistic way of saying that it's impossible. Another place, Allah Ta'ala says that if there are 7 oceans and all the trees of the world were felled in order to make pens, they wouldn't be able to write the words of our Lord. Now, this begs the question. People write masahif all the time with far less than an ocean worth of ink. So we have now some possibilities. Maybe the Quran is just trying to be real flowery and poetical. No, it's the haqq. It's the haqq. It's not flowery poetic. It's the haqq. It's not the rhetorical flourish of the shu'ara. Whoever says it is, that person is disbelieved. This is the hikmah of Allah Ta'ala not making the Prophet ﷺ a poet. The Prophet ﷺ didn't used to say ash'ar. He used to hear them and listen to them and appreciate them, indicating that it's not 100% haram. Wardak, man, you know Persian? No? You gotta learn the Persian and read the Bandanama of Fariduddin Attar and read the Gulistan, Bostan, read the Masnavi. MashaAllah, there's so much khair in all of it, all of them. Anyone here, any Afghanis or Persian speakers here? MashaAllah, right? So much khair. There's so much khair in, right? Yaad haq Ahmad, Ghizai ruh ra, marham Ahmad in dile majruh ra. Right? You guys are probably saying, oh, this guy's reading it like a desi, he's reading with the Urdu accent, right? There's so much khair, there's so much khair in it, right? But the Prophet ﷺ didn't used to himself say ash'ar. Why? So that no one will ever make the accusation that there's anything in the Quran that's a rhetorical flourish. Why? Because it's the haqq. So what does it mean then? What it means is what? If the Quran was just the words, then these verses would have no meaning. Rather, the words are what? The words are a pointer. Anyone here a programmer? C++, you know what pointers are, right? It's a pointer toward what? The haqiqah, which is the sifa of Allah Ta'ala, which like Allah Ta'ala, all of His sifat are eternal, uncreated, and infinite. So what? The words are finite, but the thing they're pointing to, the thing that they're linking you to, that thing is infinite. Now this tells us something about the nature of the Quran. This is one of the things, I see this from people, this objection, that they're like, oh, what's the point of making all the kids hufaz? They don't even understand what they're reciting. I go, nobody understands what they're reciting. Tell me, who here knows what alif lam mim means? And get up and tell me what your opinion is so I can throw the pen at you. Anyone? I have 2 of them and a third one I'll throw at you afterward because you're just making it up. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. If the Quran, the haqiqah, the reality of the Quran is an eternal and uncreated attribute of Allah Ta'ala, that means that the amount of knowledge that the biggest like Shaykh of Tafsir and that the most unparted like village like gaon pind like dehat like villager person knows, it's all the same, it's all 0. Right? Because if you have a fraction, imagine you have a fraction, there's a finite number as the numerator and infinity as a denominator. What does that number approach? 0. So what is like 5 over infinity? 0. What's 5 billion trillion gazillion over infinity? 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd over infinity. It's all 0. It's the same 0. Actually, to say it's the same 0, if a mathematician was sitting here, they may like it's zero. Functionally, it's all zero, okay? This is amazing, because this means that the person who truly understands the Quran comes to it with humility, and the more humility you have, the more you'll understand, and you still don't understand it. And there's certain ayat of the Quran, if you study Arabic, you'll be like, wow, that was deep. Right? The Quran is deep, man. The Quran is some deep stuff, right? I remember we used to have a dawah table in the MSA, back in MSA days. This is one thing I'm unique amongst the Mawlviyan Kiram, that all the other Mawlvis, they clown on MSA. Because they're like, oh, look, MSA, these kids are just trying to go there and get married. So what? Is it, Wardak, what's your problem, man? Is getting married haram? It's like half the deen, man. Why are you clowning on MSA kids? How about you? Why are you clowning on MSA kids? What's wrong with that, right? So I'm not one of those type of Mawlis, okay? Alhamdulillah, by Allah's fadl, I was the president of my MSA. I actually graduated from university before I went to madrasa, right? I'm like one of those guys that, like, you know, I got out of jail and then I reformed my life and changed it around afterward, right? So what I'll say is this, is that Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. When I was in MSA, we used to have a dawah table in the quad, like on Wednesdays. People come by, ask about Islam, you know, chat it up with them. So some guy's like, yo man, is it true that there's a verse in the Quran that says truth is manifest from falsehood? I'm like, yeah. He's like, that's awesome. Can you write that verse in Arabic for me? Okay, I didn't go to Darsh Nizami. How am I supposed to know it's haram to hand like a piece of the Mus'haf to a non-Muslim, right? So I'm like, sure. You know, like I was just proud of myself that I could even put the two and two together. I took like a semester of Arabic, and so I was like, yeah, قَدْ تَبَيَّنَ الرُّشْدُ مِنَ الْغَيِّ. And I was like, awesome, right? So I wrote it down, gave it to him. He's like, cool, I'm going to get this tattooed on my chest. And then the guy next to me was like, I think we shouldn't have given that to him. Who knows? Maybe imagine someone gets it tattooed into their chest, and Yawm al-Qiyamah, they're in front of Allah, and why shouldn't I throw you in the hellfire? It's like, I got a verse of the Quran tattooed on my chest. I know it's haram, but like, you know, Allah has no need to punish anyone, right? Don't do it, by the way. If you know someone's it's haram, don't do it. But stuff happens. What can you do? So the Quran is like deep enough in English. Then how deep is it in Arabic, right? From the first day I took my first Arabic class, from that day until now, I've never opened a translation of the Quran. Not necessarily because I understand all of it. There's still so many expressions, right? What's Maulana Nabil and I had lunch yesterday, right? بَلِ السَّاعَةُ مَوْعِدُهُمْ وَالسَّاعَةُ أَدْهَى وَأَمَرُ. I said, Maulana, what's the word adha mean? I don't know what it means, so I had to look it up, right? There are many words in the Quran, they're not like typically used in Arabic, right? So adha yani a'zamu baliyatan, we looked it up, right? So and you guys probably knew that anyway. They're like, this guy doesn't even know adha, we should be teaching this class. You probably should. How come you're not doing it? I could have stayed at home this weekend. That's your bad. The idea is that the Quran is so deep when you read it in Arabic, it doesn't even sound like the Quran to you no more when it's in English. You just don't enjoy it like that. Whoever hasn't taken Arabic, really you should take it. I'm telling you, take it. If you don't, your children have to take it. Don't be like, oh, you don't have to be an Arab in order to be Muslim. I didn't say you have to be an Arab in order to be Muslim. But if Allah Ta'ala, you know, if a person wants to Yawm al-Qiyamah claim that they love Allah Ta'ala, imagine someone you love wrote you a letter. Wouldn't you want to read it? And there's like all sorts of personal things in it. You're not going to be like, hey, you know, go to the uncle in the masjid, you know, like, can you translate this for me? It's awkward, it's embarrassing, right? And at any rate, you would like to hear the words of the one that you love on your own instead of having to have an intermediary with you, right? So it's deep enough when you know Arabic. And you know, many of our Arab brothers and sisters in the masjid, you know, from Sham and from Iraq and from Yemen and from Egypt, and this language they speak is not the same language as the Quranic Arabic. If you use like classical Arabic, and there are some places in the Arab-speaking world, if you communicate with a person using classical Arabic, even if you ask them where the bathroom is, they're not going to understand it, and like they're going to be like Sadaqallah al-Azim. Like they don't have no idea. Funny but true. Funny but true. Okay? So that's a thing, right? What are you going to do? And so once you learn that language, the Quran has even more sweetness in it. And once, after knowing the language, you go deeper and deeper into it and you study it and you see what the deeper meanings are according to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. It's amazing as well. There's certain parts of the Quran you're not going to understand until you die. When the angel of death comes to you, you'll be like, that's what that ayah means. When you're in your grave, you'll be like, that's what that ayah means. When you're resurrected, you'll be like, that's what that ayah means. There's so many parts of the Quran. The people of Jahannam will be burning in Jahannam, and in their torment, they'll understand something about the Quran that they didn't know in this dunya. And the people in Jannah will be in Jannah, and they'll understand in their na'im and the bliss Allah gives them that this is what this ayah of the Quran means. And each of them according to their rank. Every time, the more time goes by, the more science understands, the more and more meanings of the Quran people will understand what they mean. And even then, all of it put together, it's not like even a bird wetting its beak in the ocean. That's why, because the Quran is what? It's the kalam of Allah, it's the sifa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, eternal and uncreated. So don't be like, don't be a hater, like, why are you teaching these kids hifz, man? They don't even understand it. It's like, okay, there's nobody who understands the Quran in that sense. I'm not saying that in order to demotivate people from learning Arabic. Learn it. I just gave you a bayan like for 10 minutes about how awesome it is. Trust me, it's amazing. But that being said, you know that the deeper you go, it's not going to make any difference. It's not going to put any dent into it. And so what does that mean? That means the most learned of the Muslims and the most unlearned of the Muslims, they're all the same when they stand in the saf. Right? So go, even if you don't understand the Salatul Tarawih, go listen to it. It's still khair for you. Right? Anyone here not understand Arabic? Does it mean that people who don't understand Arabic don't benefit from the Salatul Tarawih? Absolutely not. In fact, they're the ones who pray Tarawih in some cases more than the ones who claim to understand it. I know non-Muslims who pray Tarawih. And a person may, strange, I know non-Muslims, they'll come in Ramadan. Many non-Muslims I know that fast in Ramadan. Some of them will even come for Tarawih. What is it? Human being doesn't do things that are a waste of time. It's sometimes a struggle to get to the masjid. But when you're done with Tarawih, has anyone been like, oh, that was a waste of my time? No, everybody feels like amazing. Maybe tomorrow, because of their laziness, they may not even go. But when you're done, that moment when you're done with it, everyone feels this clean feeling inside, this beautiful feeling inside. What is that? That's because your ruh, from beyond context to time and space, it was blessed by this sifa of Allah Ta'ala. It gives you a feeling inside that you don't get from reading, the user manual of your VCR, or by reading Shakespeare, or by reading, other things. And so this is what the Quran means as an attribute of Allah, and then this is what it means as it being written in the Lawh Mahfuz. And then Allah Ta'ala says, Inna anzalnahu fi laylatul qadr. Someone's like, well, how can it be, sent down in one night when it was revealed to the Prophet ﷺ over the course of 23 years? And so the Laylatul Qadr is what? Is that Allah Ta'ala gave permission to Sayyidina Jibreel alayhi salam to make a transcript of the words that are written in the Lawh Mahfuz, and that this transcript of the Quran then comes to from the Lawh Mahfuz in the highest of the heavens to this Sama' Dunya, to this universe that we're in. And the barakah of that thing happening is what makes Laylatul Qadr Laylatul Qadr. Right? Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alfi shahr. Right? It's better than 1,000 months. It doesn't mean that 2,000 months is about the same as Laylatul Qadr. What does it mean? It's ishara from the finite to the infinite. That there's a connection now happening. Right? And all of these barakat and rahamat that come down, shifa lima fi sudur wa hudan wa rahmatan lil mu'mineen. All of these things is connected with that thing coming from that realm into this realm. And then from his base of operations within this universe, then over 23 years, Sayyidina Jibreel will bring the words of the Quran to the Prophet ﷺ for that wahi that came and touched his heart ﷺ from Allah Ta'ala directly. And then when someone says, hand me the Quran, it doesn't mean hand me the eternal and uncreated attribute of Allah Ta'ala, because that's not it doesn't work that way, right? What is it? The ulama will tell you that the technical word for this is the mushaf. The mushaf, they say, hand me the mushaf. It's excusable because people know what they mean. They know that nobody means kufr by it. But technically, you shouldn't say, hand me the Quran. You say, hand me the mushaf. Right? And so this is a copy of the copy of that copy from the Lawh Mahfuz, which was those words themselves were imbued with this link between the attribute of Allah Ta'ala by Allah Ta'ala's choice of them. And so there are some words that were chosen from the Hebrew language that comprise the Torah. There are some words that were chosen from the Syriac language that comprise the Injil. There are words from other words of wahi that are in different languages. Right? The wahi comes in different languages. The names of Allah Ta'ala come in different languages as well. And they're imbued with this link to they're pointers that point back to the sacred and holy dhat of Allah Ta'ala, because Allah gave these words these meanings, and gave these words this barakah. This is something we should understand this about the Quran. That's why when you're just reading it, no, you're not just mindlessly reading something, right? Because Mu'tazila, their thing was, look, the voice is obviously created, the ink is obviously created. How can it be the word of Allah? So we get to this is the explanation of what it is. Now we get to the refutation of the heterodox opinion. Tahawi rahimahullah ta'ala says, فَمَنْ سَمِعَهُ. It's so beautiful. Tahawi is good, mashallah. It's one thing, you can win the argument. Like I gave a really blowhard, long-winded, put Maulana Shakir to sleep, long-winded bayan about this thing, so many details. Tahawi just gets to the point. Remember this, by the way, this is a little side point. There are two ways of winning a debate. One is by being right and proving your point. Very few people do that. The other way of winning a debate is what? Stonewalling your opponent by confusing the issue so much that the time of the debate elapses and you create the false image that your 2 points of view are equal, even though you're wrong and the other person is right. And so there is a class of smart people who know how to make something wrong look right that way, and there's a class of dumb people who don't know how to get to the point. Tahawi, the book is short. He's a really smart guy, because look how quickly he cuts to the chase. This is a really long, complicated issue, right? Watch how quickly he just cuts to the chase. Like, it's amazing. People think, oh, it's really simple-minded. It's not. It's actually really smart. He says what? He goes, فَمَنْ سَمِعَهُ فَزَعَمَ أَنَّهُ كَلَامُ الْبَشَرِ فَقَدْ كَفَرَ وَقَدْ ذَمَّهُ اللَّهُ عَابَهُ وَأَوْعَدَهُ عَذَابَهُ حَيْثُ قَالَ سَأُصْلِيهِ سَقَرَ فَلَمَّا أَوْعَدَ اللَّهُ بِسَقَرَ لِمَنْ قال إن هذا إلا قول البشر علمنا وأيقنا أنه قول خالق البشر ولا يشبه قول البشر. So he says, whoever hears this Quran and claims that it is the speech of a human, that person has committed disbelief, and Allah has censured and blamed that person and found fault with that person and threatened that person with his torment. When he said, "Sa'uslihi saqar," I will roast him on the blazing fire. And so if the person who Allah Ta'ala has threatened with the blazing fire for saying, indeed, this is the speech of a human being, we know and we're certain that it is this speech of the creator of humans, and it doesn't resemble the speech of human beings. So the Mu'tazila, look, Allah Ta'ala himself referred, حَتَّى يَسْمَعُ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ. Allah Ta'ala himself calls the Quran Kalamullah. So it's a metaphor. If you're saying it's created, then how can... Anyway, fine, whatever. We'll put that to the side for a second. Now, Tahawi brings up an interesting, simple point. Okay? Imagine if the speech isn't the speech of Allah, but it's created. The speech has to be attributed to someone. So what's the most honor? I say, we're Mu'tazila, but we're not kafirs, we're still Muslims, right? So we can't say rationally, it doesn't make sense to us that it's from Allah, that it's the speech of Allah, because it's obviously created. So then what's the most honored thing or person or creation that you can attribute it to after Allah? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? So okay, we want to honor the Quran. So we'll say it's created Allah. It's the words are the words of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's exactly the same thing that Abu Jahl and Walid ibn Mughira said, right? So this is the problem with the Mu'tazila. Even though Allah knows best what's in people's hearts, in their attempt to be rationalist philosophers, many of the things they end up saying are actually, Tahawi kind of shows like, hey, this is actually the same thing that the mushrikeen said to the Prophet ﷺ. Even though their intention may have been very different in doing so. Right? We won't say that these people hate Allah. Allah knows best what's inside of their heart, but they made a mistake because of which they end up saying a lot of silly things. So if you attribute it to the Prophet ﷺ, which is the best attribution you can make, from there it just goes downhill. If that's the same thing that the mushrikeen of Quraysh were saying, albeit with a much more malevolent intention, And Allah Ta'ala said, whoever says that this is the speech of humans, that I'm going to send them to Jahannam, then obviously that's not what's going on here. What does he do? He wins the argument. He cuts to the chase really quickly. It's a very astute observation of his. He says that because that's what happened, right? The Abu Jahl and Al-Walid ibn Mughira, after all, they're Arabs, and they took pleasure in the eloquence and the beauty of the Quran, and they used to sneak out and they used to hide and listen to it because they liked it. It was cool. It was awesome, you know. It was amazing. And that's one of the reasons it upset them so much too. One thing is that the Quran is calling them idiots. The second thing is it does it with style. That must have infuriated them. But the thing is they enjoyed it, so they would hide and they would listen to it. And then what would they say? They would say, oh no, he's a sha'ir, he's majnoon, he's this, he's that. You know, it's just a qawl al-bashar, it's just this man made it up and he's claiming that it's from Allah. Okay, it's fancy, but it doesn't come from Allah. He's the one who said it, right? And that's what, if it's kufr, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If it was kufr when Abu Jahl said it, why should it be any different when the Mu'tazila say it? Abu Ali al-Jubba'i and Nadham and all of these weird old school Mu'tazili characters. So that's the Aqidah with regards to the Quran. ومن وصف الله بمعنى من معاني البشر فقد كفر فمن أبصر هذا اعتبر وعن مثل قول الكفار انزجر وعلم أن الله تعالى بصفاته ليس كالبشر. Whoever, and so now he abstracts the point slightly, okay? Meaning what? He generalizes it. He says whoever describes Allah Ta'ala with a reality from the realities of being human, that person has disbelieved. And whoever ponders over this point will take heed and will be deterred from speaking the speech that resembles the speech of the kuffar, namely the mushrikeen of Quraysh. And that person will know that Allah Most High, in all of His attributes, is not like humans. Is not like humans. So this is a very important rule, by the way. Remember we mentioned this. Like, there's a class of people, mashallah, big defenders of traditional Islam that are on the internet and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, whatever other weird thing people are using nowadays. They're on all of these things, and they're like, haranguing everybody who's an enemy of Islam and saying, well, Islam is good and this ism is wrong and that ism is wrong, and they get up and act real champion-y like, but they never bother to learn like Nahu and Sarf. They never bother to learn fiqh or aqidah or whatever. So one of these gentlemen, mashallah, once came to my house. It's interesting how Allah Ta'ala, I'm the cat that Allah Ta'ala drags the mouse to him. I don't need to go out and hunt for it. MashaAllah. So this guy, one of my Maliki fiqh students, brought him to my house one time. I'm not going to name names because I really do think he's well-intentioned, although I have serious reservations about a lot of things he says in public, and I wonder if it's going to end up benefiting or harming more. And this class of people, there's a class of people like this that are very popular on the social media, and they all scare me. Roughly about half of them don't like me, and about half of them like me. Both sides scare me. Why? How can you defend something you never bothered to learn yourself? If this is what your occupation is going to be, go learn Arabic, go learn Nahu, Sarf, Balagha, go spend years of your life studying this thing and understand it with depth. Then when you defend it, it's going to be useful. There will be barakah in it, Otherwise, don't make too many opinions about things. So, Allah forgive me, I myself feel like I haven't studied enough and I'm like in a fitna in this position. I really question how people who have studied so little can be so confident in saying certain things that they say. One of these type of individuals, someone sent me a YouTube account about how the word aqidah doesn't exist in the Quran, and we don't need to study aqidah. And I'm like, please don't. By the way, if that was the method of interpreting the Quran, then nothing would be haram except for the Masjid al-Haram. There's a justice in the Pakistan Supreme Court, Islamic Republic of Pakistan, right? His name was Javed Iqbal, and he's not the son of the poet Shah Muhammad Iqbal, what the Persian speakers refer to as Iqbal-e-Lahori. He's a drunkard, and he would say what? He would say that there's nowhere in the Quran where it says that drinking is haram. And it's like, yeah, there's nothing, if by that standard, nothing's haram except for al-masjid al-haram. It just says that it's like, ummahatul khaba'ith and it's rijs and all this other stuff. And yeah, you're right. It doesn't actually say, use the word haram, right? It's just like the mother of like all foulness and filth and this and that. And just don't do it. But it's not haram. The word haram doesn't come, right? So at any rate, this brother, he's, I'm like, you're a big intellectual defender of Islam on the internet. I go, have you read any books of Aqidah? Have you read any books of Kalam? And he's like, no. And I'm like, do you read Arabic? He's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, you should read this book, that book. He's like, no, I read Arabic as in like I know how to read the Quran. I don't understand it. So, okay. And I'm like, well, don't you think that if this is going to be what you're going to do, that you should maybe study the books of Aqidah? He's like, well, Shaykh, with all due respect, the issues I have to deal with are not dealt with in the old books. They're new issues. I go, dude, you just told me a minute ago you didn't read the old books. So how do you know that the old books don't deal with them? They're actually quite robust. I mean, they deal with a lot more than a person would think. And so he's like, well, they don't. I go, tell me an issue then that the old books don't deal with. And he gave an example, something I mentioned earlier, which is like, well, I have like all these feminists, they come up to me and they're like, how come the Quran says he for Allah Ta'ala instead of she? And I'm like, you kidding? You're joking? Or are you serious? This is what you're talking about that's not in the old books of Aqidah or whatever? He's like, yeah. I go, forget about the books of Kalam. This is the Tahawiyyah. It's like made for like written for villagers and things like that. What does he say? He says, man wasaf Allah bima'na min ma'an al-bashar faqad kafar. وَمَنْ أَبْصَرَ هَذَا اعْتَبَرَ, etc. Whoever describes Allah with the trait of human beings, that person is disbelieved. So what we can tell you is that the grammatical masculine gender is used as a matter of necessity in the Arabic language because all nouns either have a feminine or a masculine gender. So as a matter of necessity, the masculine gender is there. Why did Allah choose it? He knows best. But what we can tell you is it doesn't mean biological gender, and anyone who thinks it means biological gender is committed kufr, according to this rule we just read. Right? I mean, Persian is different, right? In Persian, everyone's oo, right? There's no, this he, she, it, it's the same word for everyone, right? Oo can mean he, it can mean she, it can mean it, right? So there's a lot here. And there are many people, by the way, who are like, I'm an atheist, I don't believe in God. Why? Because someone told them God is an old man who sits in a chair in the sky. And so that's what they disbelieved in, but that's not Allah. So there's a lot of khair, there's a lot of haqiqah in here, inshallah. We're going to go until 3:07. That's what we made Mashra and decided before, inshallah. Actually, any questions? 4 minutes is not enough time to get into the next point, so questions? Well, by the way, someone asked, you don't give time for questions. Questions are going to be limited to something that is related to the topic. And priority will be given to questions that are questions about the text that clarify some meaning in the text. They say that there's no such thing as a dumb question. In all honesty and good conscience, I cannot agree with this statement because I've heard too many of them in my life. However, and this is another interesting point, that like the old books of ilm, they're written in rational order. So many questions that people have, actually you'll get to them later. So don't feel bad if I put it off. If I don't answer it in public, come see me afterward and I'll answer it in private. And come see me before class, after class, whatever. Inshallah, I will answer your questions. If someone's questions don't get answered, I'll leave my email on the board and you can email me your questions as well. Email, it sometimes takes me a while, but I do answer questions. Even it may take a month or so sometimes to get to it, but I get to the questions. Except for if somebody asks me something really crazy, like when the Imam Mahdi comes, should I buy a gun? I'm probably not going to answer that email. Okay? People ask dumb things like that, and it's just like, you know what? No, spam box. But reasonable questions do get answered, alhamdulillah. So are there any questions right now? 1 or 2 minutes. Sisters, I'll give priority to questions from the sister section just because it's harder for them to pull me aside in the hallway or whatever. Anyone? Okay, inshallah, please make your wudu.